You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast. Thank you for joining us on this Friday. We have a lot to dig into. As I was telling some of the folks in the pre-streaming section, we are going to be shutting our broadcast, no matter where we are in the outline, at 8:15 or right before so, because Erika Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow, is expected to address those who watch from the Turning Point social media channels on Rumble, YouTube, X, as well as Fox News. So in respect to Erika and to the Turning Point family, we have linked in the description of the show the Turning Point channels on YouTube and Rumble. And then if you're in a place where you're watching us on cable television, if you can flip over to Fox News at 8:15, I believe that is when they are rebroadcasting that. So this morning, I was finishing up breakfast. It was very early morning because I had an uncomfortable hunch about today, just in complete transparency and honesty with all of you, when I learned that we had, in fact, got him. The assassin of Charlie Kirk was announced to have been turned in by President Trump going on Fox and Friends this morning. Here is that clip of how that event transpired.
Father went to a U.S. Marshal who was fantastic, by the way, and the person was involved with law enforcement but was a person of faith, a minister, and brought him to a U.S. Marshal who was fantastic, and the father convinced the son, this is it. And again, I'm always subject to be corrected, but I'm just giving you, based on what I'm hearing, they'll give you a much more active. I just heard about it 5 minutes before I walked in. As I'm walking in, they said, looking real good. They have the person that they wanted. So
after that, there was about an hour and a half that went by, and then there was the press conference. I had a very, 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 very uncomfortable feeling that we were about to have in kind of the online space a day that would be fought tooth and nail. So before we cut over to Elizabeth, I want to clarify two things. First of all, in previous tragedies, heinous crimes, and other deeply terrible moments for individuals and America as a whole, there is a rush in today's day and age with open source intelligence on social media. Open source intelligence is one of the classifications, one of the categories of intelligence in the military sense, that essentially is the scouring of every publicly available piece of information in order to gain a clearer picture about a suspect, about a victim, about a series of events, that the media outlets that will then take that, and then the journalists, reporters will then build a clearer story, and law enforcement officials will build a clearer story. I knew that this would be a race to politically identify this individual who had shot Charlie Kirk and killed him. And so we committed the entire day to watching the roots. From the very bottom of the instant that certain details and rumors flew, how individuals who tell you they are unbiased, who tell you they have your best interest at heart, who tell you what you should think, what they were then going to do with all of the data and the rumors that came out. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, we're going to move over to Elizabeth Mitchell, who initially, by the way, the legal term at this stage is suspected assassin. That does not mean that, well, we think he's the guy, but we don't know. No, he is, in fact, the assassin. But legally, the term that must be used is suspected assassin because under the law, innocent until proven guilty. Not because I want that for him. I hate this man. I want to see him publicly hanged. If he's the guy that did it, I want him from a rope in front of the entire country. But so that you don't get any wrong ideas, suspected assassin is the term that is used legally because that is the constitutional right afforded whether an individual honors it or not. So with that, let's get a little bit more information on this press conference. We now head over to Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent. Obviously, we know you've been keeping very close tabs on what's been coming out of the FBI, the governor's office in Utah this morning. Elizabeth, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Tony, good to see you.
All right, so now this evening, as we begin to look at some of these earlier press conferences, the catching of the shooter, what are some of the key things that we need to pay attention to? Because I've heard a ton of analysis today and a lot of it bad.
There was a press conference this morning, including the Utah governor and FBI director Kash Patel, along with others. And they said they have caught the 22-year-old suspected assassin. He had a gun that had political messaging on it, such as kill fascists type of thing, and also had lyrics from an Antifa song. So it appears that, like we expected, he is someone who was radicalized by the far left. And so that suspicion is confirmed here. We're still getting more details about him and about his motivation, but the governor of Utah said that it appears that it was politically motivated due to the messages on that gun and the fact that in the days leading up to Charlie Kirk's speech on that university, he told his parents and friends that he did not like Charlie Kirk, did not like the ideas he espoused, and the young man had become more political in recent years.
I'm going to add two extra things there because I think they're rather pertinent to a very detailed summary that you provided there. On the other cartridges, there are a couple of things people are already trying to misconstrue as video game references, things that Catch This Fascist is not a reference that I'm aware of to Helldivers 2. And I say that because producer Nick and I both play Helldivers 2 quite a bit. Now, the governor did talk about the arrows found on one cartridge. That is a reference to the up arrow, right arrow, and then down, down, down arrow. That is a reference to dropping a 500 kilogram bomb in the game Helldivers. That appears to be the only reference to that game in the cartridges. But that said, Bauchella, of course, as you were talking about earlier, that does in fact fit a far leftist political song. Number two, I will also say if you read this, "You're gay," LMAO on the cartridge, that's been something on Tumblr that's been popular for years, suggesting that anyone who they think is homophobic or transphobic is secretly gay. That is a very, very popular joke on the young progressive left. So again, I'm looking over this. Also, the discords this guy was a part of. Early information. I know you've been watching Kash Patel give details from inside the FBI, inside the ATF on the investigation into this guy. This man was also a part of quite a few Antifa linked or directly open Antifa servers. Is there anything else that we know about this guy yet?
We're still gathering more and more information about him, but we know that his family actually turned him in. His dad drove him to the police station and turned him in, which was a very great move, a very patriotic move of that father to go ahead and turn in his own son, because his son, unfortunately, is a serious suspected criminal and a major assassin of perhaps, I think this is definitely the most significant assassination of either of our lifetimes. This is a very big deal. And so this young man was turned in by his family, and that was the right move there.
So I want to move just slightly over to the way that the FBI, that the police, and that the governor's office in Utah handled this from the beginning. There was a lot of initial criticism that the FBI was focusing on the messaging on the cartridges instead of looking for the alleged shooter, the alleged assassin, that they were just arresting people at random. There are all these left-wing influencers, of course. You saw an initial report from the New York Times that criticized the FBI over this. A lot of left-wing influencers did as well. What are we seeing now? I mean, are we seeing people retract previous statements and apologize? I mean, I think the New York Times issued kind of a quarter of an almost retraction on blaming Charlie Kirk for anti-Semitic remarks. This is horrible coverage. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this.
It's horrible. They're taking what Charlie Kirk said in his life out of context. And we're seeing a lot of, it's sad that even Charlie Kirk died, or despite my political views, I'm sorry that Charlie Kirk died. There's no need to say that. If you did not agree with Charlie Kirk, you don't need to put that out there. Your grief for the death of a husband and a father of two small children. That's a
Very good point, Elizabeth. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
You're right.
You.
You're completely right. This is a 31-year-old man who had a lot of life left to live. He had a baby son, a 4-year-old daughter, a beautiful young wife who have lost someone extremely important to them. His children likely will not even remember him because they were so young at the time of his death. This is an absolute tragedy, and using this as an opportunity for Democrats to share their political beliefs and highlight why they disagreed with Charlie Kirk is extremely inappropriate. I think if a prominent Democrat died, I don't think there is a Democrat equivalent to Charlie Kirk. He really is one of a kind. But if a Democrat similar to Charlie Kirk were to pass away, I do not think that Republicans would be tweeting, "I do not agree with him. Here's all the bad things he said." I think the only appropriate response is to send condolences and prayers to the family who's grieving and to highlight the great things in his life. And something I was encouraged by is that some left-leaning individuals like Ezra Klein have written that Charlie Kirk was a wonderful man for what he did, and that his commitment to civil discourse and respectful dialogue is admirable for people on both sides of the political aisle. That's the kind of thing that we should be focusing on when someone dies, not highlighting what you disagreed with, and especially not continuing to use the type of rhetoric that led to this type of violence, such as calling him a Nazi, Hitler, the like. That is extremely inappropriate in this time and very disrespectful to his wife and children.
Of course, we're going to talk a little bit more later about Ezra Klein and the abundance movement in the Democrat Party that I would argue, and I will argue here in a couple of minutes, has one job and one job only right now. Not talking about planes, trains, and automobiles, but about cutting out this Antifa Marxist wing from their party. They're not going to do it. I pray that they do anyway. Elizabeth Mitchell, our White House correspondent, as always, thank you. We know you're following this very closely, and hope that you get to spend some time with your family this weekend.
Thanks, Tony. See you soon.
All right. So following the press conference, as I said right beforehand, everything suddenly depended on how all of the media would cover this. And now, as we have learned from the trial of Derek Chauvin, as we learned from trials surrounding Daniel Penny, we know that how the media covers things now will shape future trials. It will shape the future of this country. And so the information that is amplified and allowed to be spoken as the truth, I want to make that crystal clear, allowed to be considered the truth, will determine the political, societal, and legal future of this country. And so my team has excellently, I'm very proud of my producers, has spent the entire day making sure that every little rabbit trail rumor was highly scrutinized to the best of our ability. For example, there was a photo that came out rather early today that showed an individual in a Molly vest, a military style vest used for pouches for ammunition or a first aid kit, that kind of a thing, that had a gay flag and a trans flag on it. And it was said, this is the guy. It was not the guy. A totally different individual. Although there were many who claimed, oh, this was the guy, so therefore there's some proof. There were a lot of things in the early part of the day that developed. And there were, we're going to get right into it here. What I talked about with Elizabeth Mitchell, the key piece of information that we knew coming out of the press conference that the FBI had talked about, that Governor Cox had talked about. Now we get into the details. The things that we knew right off the bat. There were cartridges in the weapon. One of them spent. At least 3 of them had additional writing on them. Now, as a reminder, this had been previously leaked, or we're not quite sure if the ATF delivered it immediately. They did follow up and confirm it. It was an internal letter that was sent to Stephen Crowder, to the Daily Wire, to a couple of our other friends in the sphere. And in these letters, in this letter, they stated that there were cartridges that had pro-trans and anti-fascist or Antifa messaging on the cartridges. The New York Times, as well as several left-wing influencers, immediately came out and said this was wrong, it was stupid. Actually, on the rim of the cartridge, producer Nick, would you bring me a round of 9mm or whatever from your device, please? Not in a way that'll get us demonetized. Thanks, pal. All right, so immediately there was an argument that right on the head of the round, it's not going to focus because it's set to a strict focus here, that the writing on the cartridge, and a 30-06 round, that there was TRN. And they're saying, oh, well, there are the stupid FBI under Kash Patel is suggesting that means trans. And actually, it just means the round was made by a Turkish manufacturer. That was what was peddled as the truth. It was run in various major institutional outlets. That was wrong. That was incorrect. What we found, again, out of the conference, what we started the day with, and this would turn into everything, is there were 4 phrases. First of all, quote, hey, fascist, comma, catch in all capital letters, and then 5 arrows, up, right, down, 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 end quote. Number 2, notices bulge, and then it's UWU or is it OWO? OWO. What's this? The OWO is pronounced uwu. I've never thought I would say that on this show. Number 3, quote, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO, end quote. And then finally, the words, oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. So immediately just flagrant lies about what was on these cartridges. And it infuriated me because it was so ready to be picked up by the media. Why? Why was it so ready to be picked up? Any lie that was put out, no matter what, going into today. I knew, you knew, everyone knew, especially after the cover-up of Biden, the cover-up for the Nashville shooter, the cover-up for the Minneapolis shooter at the Ascension Church, the controversy surrounding the shooting of the Minnesota State representative and her husband. As soon as you get into this, there is any kind of politically ambiguous statement that can be contrived will be shouted from the rooftops as proof this guy was a Republican. On one of the unspent cartridges, hey, fascist, catch, and then arrows. That immediately puts every person on the Democrat side of the aisle who has spent the last days saying that, oh, this isn't a left-wing attack. We don't know anything yet. We don't know there was any kind of a political motivation. As MSNBC said, it could have just been a guy firing his gun off in celebration. People who said anyone looking for political motivations in this is wrong, and it's probably a right-wing guy anyway. You knew and I knew that as soon as the words, hey, fascist, catch was found on a cartridge, it was inescapable. And so the mode of the day, the name of the game, and it was in fact a game to these sick people, was to twist these things any way that they could. So you had major people coming out and saying, well, this is going to expose me as a gamer, but both the arrows and the fascist reference they mention for the shooter's ammo are direct reference to the video game Helldivers 2 and are common memes. You heard me mention this to Elizabeth. I'm going to set this very straight right here, right now. I actively enjoy Helldivers 2. It is a great game. It is reminiscent of Destiny, of Halo 3 and Halo Reach, some great environmental shooting. In fact, Stephen Kent and I have talked about that show upon that game upon my insistence and the culture surrounding it months ago. Producer Nick is also someone who enjoys playing this with us regularly. In fact, someone in the Discord for the show. We enjoy it. I'm also active in the Helldivers 2 Discord and Reddit. Why do I bring this up to you as though you care? Because the argument that is being made is, hey, fascist, catch can't be used as proof this guy was a far leftist Antifa guy. Because after all, the word fascist is mentioned in Helldivers, which is turned into the quote, hey, fascist, catch, is used in Helldivers 2. That is not true whatsoever. We went back through and scoured over not just the current Commons articles that archive all of the voice quotes in the game, but we looked at the archived copies before the assassination just to ensure nothing could have been changed post the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There is not one quote that even gets close from an NPC, a non-playable character, or a character in the game that says anything closely related to, hey, fascist, catch. Nothing about it. The up, right, down, 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 however, as I explained to Elizabeth, that is a reference to a stratagem in the game. Essentially, it's a support item that you throw in. That particular support item is the 500 kilogram bomb. It is something you throw down when things are bad and when you want to see a very, very big boom. And in the Reddit and the Discord, so I mentioned this, there are memes, jokes that are made between players that when you need to do anything, when there's any problem at all in life, up, right, down, 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 no matter what it is. It actually is a joke that stems from the Dungeons and Dragons wizard using fireball for anything. Just a little internet history from someone who's been online a little too much in his life. But the idea that the hey fascist catch and then up, right, down, down, down is just him referencing Helldivers is extremely disingenuous. Hey fascist catch is in fact an Antifa reference on Antifa message boards, on Tumblr, on Reddit, on Blue Sky. There have been posts upon posts about saying, hey fascist catch, or hey fascist dodge, hey fascist look out, when discussing a person on the right being shot or stabbed. There are thousands of documented cases of this. It is wholly dishonest to suggest that's not the case. So that aside, people started pointing out NBC News articles complaining about Helldivers and say, well, actually, fascism is mentioned in Helldivers. Yes, it is. Because it's based off of the satirical Starship Troopers from the 90s. A great movie, but a horrible adaptation of an excellent book, which I've talked about before. Moving on. The next case that was made is that Ciao Bella is actually a song that a lot of groypers are using these days. A groyper is an anti-Semite, someone who hates Jewish people, is often very white supremacist, who is part of extremely far to the right circles, and really not even to the right because they horseshoe theory around with the left online. They've issued threats against me, against my family. They really don't like me because I'm a Baptist. And although many of them who have never stepped foot in a church and pretend to be Catholic and essentially try to use cherry-picked parts of scripture as a weapon against Protestants, are in no way, shape, or form Christians. And by the way, I just want to make this very clear, are very often disavowed and cut off from anything and everything. And I know that because the political organization I used to write for was the group that kicked out Nick Fuentes. So moving forward from that, Ciao Bella is not an original song just with the groyper alt-right, not alt-right, it's not the right word, the far-right anti-Semite white supremacist crowd. That's not where that originates from. It is from the Italian World War II anti-fascist kind of communist revolutionary revolt. It's a resistance song that is championed by Marxists, by communists. Now look, in internet meme culture, very often different songs, different jokes are co-opted by the group that they're mocking. But in the case of his writing, oh, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, 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 that is cited, quoted directly most often by Antifa and pro-Marxist groups, just by rote definition. Producer Nick, do you have something to add?
Not to get ahead, but very consistently, these imagery that the connotations are bringing is of this distinctly, quote, brain rot culture that is referenced within this individual being deeply held in Discord communities of the anti-fascist movement.
So you're correct. Moving forward from that, and I just want to make sure that we're staying on time as quickly as possible here. The next quote, if you read this, you are gay, LMAO, end quote. This has been painted by a lot of people today as, oh, see, he says, oh, if you read this, you're gay. Therefore, he's on the right because he's homophobic. No, that's not what this means. It's not. There is, and I went back today and looked through a lot of screenshots that we have kept over the years from individuals on the left in the LGBTQ plus circles and the pro LGBTQ plus circles, because to be a loyal advocate for the LGBTQ plus trans whatever group does not mean being gay or trans yourself. In fact, there is a long-running joke among dudes in my age bracket down to the Generation Z bracket that if you want to have sex, one of the best ways to do so is to go to a pride rally and tell all of the girls there that you're super into whatever it is they're protesting for. And it's like laying fish in a barrel. Sorry, excuse the phrase. So in that instance, there is a large group of individuals in the pro LGBTQ plus 2IA movement who have built their entire identity around being an ally. And one of the most popular things in these particular forums and groups and on various pages, from Facebook to X to Tumblr to Reddit, various sites around the interwebs, have essentially pointed out that if you are a Republican or on the right side of the aisle, or you're in the center and you care at all about the LGBTQ plus stuff going after kids or being a problem or mental health crisis. The only reason you would care about that is because secretly, closetedly, you are gay or trans. That's the only reason you would do it. These memes are everywhere. And based on what we know about the shooter so far, it appears that he wrote this in the same way that I've seen the exact same joke on these message boards saying anyone who reads this story is gay. The only reason someone would care about this is because they're gay. Essentially, what I believe based on the evidence is that this was kind of a sick joke for the cops and whoever picked it up. If you read this, you're gay, haha, now you're part of the thing. That kind of a closeted stab. Now, again, like other jokes out there that are held by a community, they are always co-opted by the other side. For example, after a lot of the mockery and jokes and satire, for example, about Charlie Kirk, in which South Park made a pun about Charlie Kirk saying, oh, the master debater. And obviously the joke there, pretty obvious. A lot of people in Turning Point USA then began calling each other master debaters because you co-opt jokes. The song Yankee Doodle is literally America co-opting a song making fun of Americans from the Brits to the point that we would force captured Brits to sing the song as a form of torture, which is awesome. But I digress. So for those who are like, oh, that's the secret. No, it's just not. Therefore, if we look at all of those things together, does any of that suggest that he is a member of the right? Nope, not at all. And those that are going to continue coming out here and telling you that actually this is really obscure are angry. They are scared that now the Antifa LGBTQ plus crew has yet again followed the Minneapolis shooter in writing things on the weapon and the ammunition in order to make it very clear what the motive behind the shooting was. And may I just say very clearly that, thank God, Governor Cox's administration in Utah is the administration that presided over this investigation. Because if something like this happened in Minnesota or Jared Polis, Colorado, I doubt that you would hear anything at all, as has been very transparent from Kash Patel's FBI under the Trump administration and Governor Spencer Cox in Utah. Now, also, there were malicious, horrible, terrible, bold-faced garbage lies that started sprouting up around just making things up. There were pictures that were shared all over social media today that you have seen, like the shooter in a Trump shirt, completely photoshopped, still being shared right now, will still be shared tomorrow as evidence. No one's fact-checking anything. I guarantee you right now, there is no New York Times or PolitiFact or Pointer article or a Reuters fact check article that is saying this photo of the shooter in a Trump shirt is false, because they only ever fact check one way. Another garbage thing is sharing a picture of the shooter in a costume around Halloween that they say, oh, he's in a Trump costume. From what I can tell, the picture is of, it looks like he's riding Trump's shoulders, and it's meant to be an insulting thing. It's certainly no like I love Donald Trump kind of a thing. Producer Nick?
Alongside that, there's also personal information of a person sharing the name as the shooter being referenced among many circles as justification that he was a Trump supporter, as the person being referenced is a registered Trump supporter Republican who voted.
We're gonna get to that. So now there was the Social Democrat League or Social Democrats of the Left, one of the bigger accounts that are on the Democratic Socialist Front, posted a screenshot of voting records with an open address and open details. They said in 2020, a Tyler Robinson, the name of the shooter, in St. George, Utah, donated $224.48 to Donald Trump. And then they said, in parentheses, the suspected killer lives in a St. George, Utah suburb at this zip code. And they just shared it. No fact checking, no double check, no reaching out, not even looking to see on Zillow, which is what a lot of people use to dox individuals, or Google, or one of the basic police finder detail websites to confirm that was the individual. And yeah, you guessed it. That's not the same Tyler Robinson. I know that you're shocked. Tyler and Robinson are common names in the United States. So they had to come out hours later after this had already been reported by all of these major outlets around the country, that, oh, they had confirmation he was a Republican. He donated to Donald Trump. No, he was not registered in Utah as a Republican, in a state that you can register as a Republican. And according to the FBI, politically inactive. They had to come out later and say, no, that's not the guy, after people had already begun tracking this other guy down and harassing him, his family, all other kinds of stuff. The mental intelligence of a dead snail from these people. Last but not least, TMZ, known for paying people thousands, tens of thousands of dollars for nip slips and upskirt shots of minors. TMZ ran this incredibly ridiculous story from the owners of Discord. So I've said that word a lot. Discord is simply a messaging application in which you can set up a server that will then be a group chat for you and your friends. They're very large servers. Our show has one that if you are bored and you want to join chat, there's a link in the description. Discord servers are everywhere. They are as synonymous now as Facebook messaging groups or Reddit subreddit pages or Twitter DMs if you're, I guess, really old. So in that instance, Discord, I guess one of the owners or CEOs sat down with TMZ and said, oh yeah, this Tyler Robinson guy, he didn't use Discord at all. There are these statements that have been made that he was on Antifa Discord groups and Tyler didn't even use anything like that. And so TMZ just ran that as though it was gospel truth. Tyler Robinson isn't even on Discord. All these Republicans are saying he was active on Antifa Discords because, again, it's kind of hard to say this is like some right-wing Christian conservative guy and if he's surfing Antifa Discord groups. Because according to Governor Cox's office and the FBI, pictures were provided to the marshals, to the FBI, and to the governor's office as the messages came in on the Discord chats, in which he coordinated for a gun drop-off, as well as suggested and took ideas from other Antifa groups. Which, by the way, to make this very clear, Antifa should be listed today as a domestic terror organization. And I do want to offer a bit of praise. So I had a panel discussion this afternoon on NTD with a former Obama guy, Democrat strategist, Robin Bureau. And I brought up that right now, Democrats, instead of what we're going to get to here in a second, is a bunch of people futzing around and saying, well, it's really both sides are bad and refusing to say anything else. That just like when the right side of the aisle, after there is an attack by a confirmed white supremacist, said white supremacy has no place in this country, hang him from a rope. The left also needs to make it clear Antifa has no place in this country. It is a domestic terror organization. And he, to my amazement, he completely agreed. And this is really the key, because there is a rising movement in the Democrat Party which has come to believe that the hyper-regulatory, no power for anybody, no water for anyone, sit in your home and eat bugs group that a lot of the young progressive socialists are highly in favor of is awful. It's led by Ezra Klein, and it is called the abundance movement. The idea that you essentially use America's natural resources and then enact Democrat policies, which means that instead of getting bad Democrat things right now, you get them in like 50 years. But I digress. There is an opportunity, of course, as there always is, for the left to cut off a group that will lead them to ruin. They won't do it, though, by the way, just so that you know. I want them to. I think it would be better for the country if they were disavowed. I think it would be better for the country if Antifa was labeled a domestic terrorist group and the individuals involved with Antifa Discord and messaging services, whom I marched alongside in Chicago's DNC protest when they broke down the barrier and shouted some of the most abhorrent evil filth I've ever heard in my entire life. Those people should be arrested and thrown in prison for a very, very, very long time. For fomenting terrorism, not for speech, for fomenting, inciting, and participating in terrorism. Andy No, of the Post-Millennial, good friend of the show, also a good friend of Charlie Kirk's, has written and covered extensively Antifa's operations in training people to shoot others, including, by the way, the shooting of ICE officers in Texas. That was just a couple of months ago. You don't hear any Democrats when they're only talking about one. There's only one crime right now that many of the Democrat officials and journalists and media groups are spending their time arguing about right now. And this brings us to the insane coverage. Because at the end of today, while there are still people trying very desperately to claim that, well, actually, we don't know what he was. And if we do know, he's actually some really far to the right conservative because his family was conservative. And yeah, of course, that doesn't make any sense because his dad was the one who turned him in and didn't take the reward money, at least from the reports that we have, of $100,000. He didn't take it. Turned his own son in. That, oh, well, he was actually a secret conservative because they really want him to be. They want him to be. So that instead of saying both sides are bad, they want to say this is right on right violence. This is a young white Christian boy who, a little MAGA war on the inside of the right. That's what they want it to be, because otherwise the American people come to terms in a way they have not done since the 1960s and 70s, right before Ronald Reagan. That the radical element of the left that grew out of the sexual revolution incorporated Marxism into its very being, that came out of the little Berkeley Revolution and would leech off of America and put innocent people in hospital beds and in graves for years, should not be trifled with, it shouldn't be messed with, and they should get out, either by voluntary or by force. Now, again, this brings us to a couple of what I would argue are pretty shocking developments. First of all, the group that is doubling down in the midst of all of this, which is truly shocking to me. There are individuals on the left who are saying, well, we're not going to stop calling Republicans Nazis and fascists, you know, the kind of thing that led to this directly. Not raised the temperature, not made things a little more testy. Repeatedly, there was compilation after compilation after compilation. Well, beyond numbers of compilations. We might play them later if we have the time. Of individuals calling Republicans Nazi fascists that need to be stopped inside, outside the law, violent means, any means necessary. And now you have people like ex-MSNBC host Katie Fang saying, you know what, we're not going to be intimidated by the right. We're going to keep calling them fascists and keep inciting the violence. Here you go.
We cannot be allowed to be cowed into submission by fear and intimidation. That's exactly what the result is that's being sought by people who do not want us to be able to express our First Amendment free speech rights.
What a thing to say after Charlie Kirk was shot for expressing his First Amendment right by an individual who wrote on a cartridge, "Catch this, fascist."
To be able to express how we feel about things. The one thing we cannot do is we cannot take that and we cannot make it into an act of violence. End of story.
One thing we cannot do is take that into an act of violence. Interesting. So there's a little acknowledgement in the back of the mind that, yeah, there are people that are not just, random basement dwellers online, but classroom teachers. So we're going to get into here in a couple of minutes. People in broad and open society that have been allowed for the last 10, 15 years to have these opinions, as anyone who expressed any opinion to the right was shut out. I had a guy in my organization at Indianapolis Public Schools who was a math director who constantly used this kind of filthy, disgusting rhetoric often. And when Rush Limbaugh passed away, I tweeted, "Rest in peace, Rush Limbaugh. He paved the way for so many of us." I was hauled into HR in Indianapolis Public Schools because he reported me and wrote this long email about how I wanted ownership over his black body and I was some kind of an internal fascist. The HR department praised him for his bravery for reaching out to me, or for reaching out to the HR department about me. It's been allowed to persist continually for over a decade. Americans are sick of it. And it's not just random reporters. Here's Nancy Pelosi doing the exact same routine.
People don't have any intention of saying something that's going to lead to something dangerous, but we cannot take responsibility for the minds that are out there and how.
Pelosi, we cannot take responsibility for the minds that are out there and what they might do or think. So we can say whatever it is we want. The Republicans are fascists. They need to be dealt with. They need to be killed. They're going to kill you. They're going to take away your rights. They're going to take every brown person and they're going to disappear them. Trump's the fascist, the Nazi. He's going to kill us all. Oh, but we can't take responsibility if someone then says, man, if I'm going to die, I better kill them first.
They hear it.
Other Democrats are quickly calling for gun control before we have the full picture of the alleged assassin. John?
So, sorry, that was the rest of the Fox News clip. I wanted to make sure we played it so that, we're not just grabbing things out of thin air. And then, of course, you have guys like Al Green on the floor of the House. Mr. Dastardly D's undone. The guy that was thrown out of the State of the Union style address for standing up and shaking his cane and yelling. It's Al Green. So he was back on the floor of the House to put up a picture of himself. So there's like a FedEx Kinko's that does some serious business around the Capitol. I've never understood this one, by the way. Left, right, wherever it is. Like they all go to FedEx Kinko's. Like, can we install like a projector screen in the house for crying out loud? Why we need, like they do, they print out these big, huge posters and they get a little easel. And then they get in the house and they showcase, like, look at this photo. So here's Al Green showing himself and yelling that, oh, well, really, this is all Republicans' fault.
And if you want to talk about language that precipitates this kind of behavior, language that may in some way influence people, then you're going to have to start at the top. You're going to have to start at the top. You're going to have to start with a president of the United States who told police officers, you don't have to be nice when you're arresting people.
What does that have to do with anything at all? What does that have to do? Oh, man, there's somebody that's getting robbed, and the cop comes up and goes, no, sir. You're going to have to come along with me. Why is that what his first example is for turning up the temperature?
President of the United States who told people at one of his rallies that they could assault someone who was there.
He did not, by the way. Been debunked. Left-wing outlets debunked that at the time. Brain dead take.
Not to worry about it. President of the United States who says ugly things about people.
There you go. That's his third example. He says ugly things about people. I will remind you again, Kathy Griffin held up a severed model of Donald Trump's head coated in blood. Nothing about that from Al Green. Nothing at all. The man, by the way, Al Green has said horrible, horrible, horrible things about a lot of people. And again, what's on the picture next to him? Him standing up and shaking his cane at Trump and says, censured, not silenced. Oh, so brave, so wonderful of Al Green to step away from his current journey through menopause to share that with us. So this brings us to the coverage. Because what the Democrats are now shifting to, fully as hard as they can, is that, well, actually, now, okay, maybe it was a political assassination. Maybe it was a left-wing guy that did it. But the real villains here are Republicans for noticing, and because Republicans aren't talking enough about like all of the left-wing violence the right-wing violence that Republicans are committing. That's the real crime. ABC News ran with this yesterday. Quote, Trump condemns political violence, but doesn't mention attacks on Democrats. State Representative Melissa Hortman from Minnesota and her husband Mark were killed in June in their home. That's by reporter Ivan Pereira. So first of all, I very much look forward to Ivan Pereira also joining the unemployment line, but not because ABC News fires him, but because I want the entirety of ABC News shut down. And I think I've made the case before that stockholders who invest in Disney, ABC, are currently being defrauded by the actions against stakeholders that ABC News currently takes as a news direction. But anyway, I step aside from that to point out Donald Trump has talked repeatedly, multiple times, about the horrible, violent attack against State Representative Melissa Hortman. Now, why is ABC News mentioning this? Because there is a group of Democrats that are trying to suggest as hard as they can that this is a big instance of a right-wing person attacking Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, Democrats in Minnesota, and there was no outrage from Republicans. So as one of the Republicans here, registered Republican here in Indiana, a conservative, Tony Kennett, who made an entire post condemning the individual who brutally murdered State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, and called for the guy to be hanged. I didn't see anything like in any of these articles that cited my outrage at the incident. In fact, they didn't quote any of the Republicans who we still have the tweets and the videos and the news articles and the posts of. that had argued that. And also, they didn't mention that it is not clear at all that this guy was a right-wing Republican. The only bit of information that they have so far that proves this guy was a big Trump supporter who killed Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark is because the guy's neighbor, the murderer's neighbor, told media, oh yeah, he's a big Trump supporter. That's it. Now, also kind of curious because according to The Guardian, they interviewed high school classmates and former friends of the shooter, Tyler Robinson, of Charlie Kirk, and they all said, yeah, he's like a really leftist guy, really far to the left. The rest of his family is Republican, and that really caused some problem and some friction between him and his family. Yeah, that guy's really to the left on like everything. So if we're going by the same standard as we used to ensure that we knew without beyond a shadow of a doubt that the attacker, the murderer of Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark was definitely a right-wing Trump supporter, well then I guess the testimony of these high school boys, that's gospel then, using their standard. I'm sure we're going to see that from the New York Times and ABC News and the Washington Post any day now. Oh, I'm sure of it. Yes. Peter Baker of the New York Times, speaking of, a man whose IQ could easily fit on the digits of one of your hands. He posted, right-wing influencers and at least one Trump official are encouraging people to scour the internet and expose those seen as celebrating Kirk's assassination, leading to suspensions, firings, and investigations. He phrased it, seen as celebrating. If you've been on social media at all, today, yesterday, the day before, the open celebration is just outright and open. I don't think it could get any more overt. We've played the clips on this show. And yes, some of the people who have openly celebrated the murder of a father and husband for the deep crime of speaking at a university campus, well, it just so happens those are public school teachers and elected officials and major company individuals that espouse kindness and all of these other wonderful things. And the argument that I've heard in response is, well, I thought you were against cancel culture. You thought you were against cancel culture. So first of all, let's set the record straight on cancel culture and what that is and what that isn't. So the idea that you would try to ruin someone's life over their suggesting I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat or I support Bernie Sanders or I support Donald Trump, that kind of cancel culture is in fact ridiculous. I don't really trust the COVID vaccine was used to get people fired from their positions and banned from social media platforms. However, yes, in fact, speech does have consequences. Also, part of cancel culture was demanding that the government go and arrest people for just expressing very basic political opinions. If you want to get out there and say that you're really happy that Charlie Kirk died, I think you're a sick person, I think you have the legal right to say that. I do. And I do, in fact, want people to see you say it. Because I want them to detest you as much as I detest you. And in that instance, by the way, though, do I think a company should be required to keep you on staff because you're openly celebrating the murder of a man speaking on a college campus? No, I don't think they should be forced to keep you on at all. You say, well, that's really inconsistent. First of all, no, it's not. And you know what? Even if it were, womp womp, I don't care. I don't think that you celebrating murder is some magical protected thing that you get to keep your job at Brooks Elementary School. And I wish you also a very enjoy the unemployment line. So that aside, there's also another excellent argument as to why you should absolutely report those around you at your company that you are working with or working with your children who are openly, brazenly celebrating the death of the murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And it's not from a conservative. It's from Asmongold, just a popular streamer. Here you go.
One of these companies and you have a person like this doing it, make sure to talk to HR and let them know how uncomfortable you feel that there's a person who's working at your company who might want to advocate to have you killed because you disagree with them. Tell them that it makes you afraid to come into work. Tell them that, you don't know, maybe you're going to file a lawsuit. You feel unsafe at your workplace. And honestly, here's the important thing. You should feel unsafe because these people would justify violence against anybody who disagrees with them. And just because you think you know them doesn't mean they wouldn't do the exact same thing to you.
And what's the evidence for that, by the way? there are posters being put up all over this country at events that conservatives, colleagues, friends of mine are getting ready to speak at. That is a black poster with a drawing of Charlie and then the hole spurting blood out of his neck, and it says "Debate this" as the poster. That's some pretty open celebration. And yeah, those people are in fact among you. There's no use pretending any otherwise. Absolutely. The individual who was the moderate, who encouraged you to have conversations with others, they shot him. So yeah, I'm completely, I have no sympathy whatsoever. If you are stupid and evil enough, you're an adult. You have decisions that you make, that you choose. You choose to endorse, to celebrate the assassination of Charlie Kirk because you didn't like that there was this out of context video you saw 5 seconds of that made Charlie Kirk look bad. And so you're mad that your company doesn't like that. Again, tough. I hope you're reported. And I do, in fact, hope you lose your job.
And this is them. This is the game that they're making right here. And you can see that they've made no statement about this. Now, let me ask you a very simple question. If these people made a degrading comment towards the trans community, for example, or towards the black community, for example, do you think Sucker Punch would have immediately fired them and made a statement?
There you go. There you go. That is the truth. That is the truth. Because if anyone out there said, ha ha, yes, I really enjoy seeing this black person or this transgender person, this, again, not someone who has been convicted of crimes, someone who has not been convicted of any crimes at all, literally just goes around the country talking to people. Because there's been comparisons, well, Republicans said that, Derek Chauvin, or excuse me, that George Floyd had it coming and that kind of a thing. And by the way, I do think that those who openly celebrate and laugh about death in any way, shape, or form, with the very, very, very spare, like for example, when a terrorist who has killed lots of individuals is dead, I'm not particularly sad about it. But the idea that George Floyd and Charlie Kirk, that's the same, and that, no, it's not. Again, it is not. Common sense does in fact tell you this. Now, moving forward here, there are a couple of other excellent things that I wanted to point out to you here. Benny Johnson, whom again, I've criticized a lot of his reporting before, had a phenomenal appearance on Media Today, and I definitely want to play it for you.
TikToks and celebration.
Sorry, let me frame this up. He's on Cuomo on News Nation, where I also often appear, and he's setting the record straight on a couple of things. I'm gonna try to play as much of this clip as I can.
Posts and T-shirts made celebrating this travesty. There is a fundamental difference of those who glorify death on the left, and it is demonic, it's sick, and it's dark, and it needs to be.
All right, but
it needs to be disavowed.
Benny, I hear you.
Hey guys, so Benny Johnson appeared on Cuomo's show to discuss Charlie Kirk's murder and to discuss sort of the reactions on the left to it and what might have led up to the murder. And Cuomo tries to sort of both sides this thing, there are bad people on both sides and we just have to move forward and condemn it all and yada yada. And Benny Johnson does not put up with that. He's
wrong.
And there's no question, but Benny, there is a lot of anger. There is a lot of exaggeration. It is all hate for profit on the fringe of this battling binary political system. My question is, my question is now what?
Charlie Kirk has never advocated violence ever. Charlie Kirk was only
I'm not saying
a nonviolent, peaceful debater. He went into places where he knew he was hated in order to engage.
I agree.
Kindly and humanly
that
with people.
he was not about violence.
So for you to say that it's the same thing,
hold on.
It's not, Chris.
Hold on. I'm not talking about it with Charlie. Benny, don't play games with me. I'm giving you latitude because you deserve it, because this was your friend, and this is scary, and it hurts, and it could have just as easily been you.
First of all, that is a wild thing to say. That is a wild thing to say. Like, I'm giving you latitude to speak your mind because Charlie was your friend. As though it's like he's humoring him. Benny Johnson makes a good point. Again, Chris is trying to do the both sides are, they have their rhetoric. Both sides are mean. Both sides are terrible. Oh, and here you go.
The dehumanization is wrong. It's wrong. And you'll never be able to chew me out, Chris, because I'll never dehumanize.
Benny,
if I hear that Joe Biden gets a terminal cancer diagnosis, I'll say a prayer for him. I'll say that I hope he lives the rest of his days painless. That's exactly what I said, and every person that I know and respect, and I know them all in my ecosystem, said the same thing.
Now, that is a very, very important point to make. And it is, in fact, the difference that I've seen between those on the left, by and large, right now, and those on the right, by and large. When it was announced that Joe Biden has terminal cancer, were there some right-wing accounts that were celebrating it and laughing about it? Yes, there were. Were they major, huge accounts with major, huge followings, people with verified IDs, faces that are in front of you? Nope. No. I didn't see any of them. I didn't. And if I did see them, I wouldn't associate with them. And again, I am no stranger to calling out very specifically when individuals in, for example, the House of Representatives on my side of the aisle say very, very stupid things. Absolutely. But right now, here today, there are individuals all over the left side of the aisle, Democrats in Congress, major old media and new media members, so legacy media anchors, and then streamers on the left, who are prominent in person with their real faces in front of everyone, making it explicitly clear that they don't really care and they didn't like him anyway and he deserved it and he had it coming and actually they're really happy about it. And we talked about this yesterday. If you are looking at a graph on the left and right, you're going to play the both sides game, then I should see a fairly equal number of cases on the left side and the right side of this happening. And what we are seeing over the last several years is a few instances in which someone who is associated with the far right, the white supremacist crew, has done something and has committed an atrocious and a heinous crime. And they have been condemned openly. None of those have been celebrated, not a single one of them. And then over here on the left, when there have been crimes that are extremely heinous, that are targeted, that are assassinations, that are rapes, they are laughed about, celebrated, ha, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to boo during the prayer that was offered. I'm going to put up posters saying debate this. Number upon number upon number upon number. And by the way, one of the greater arguments for this is that today, I was talking with a different Democrat strategist, and the conversation's not over, so I'm not going to name him yet, that suggested that the great counter to how people are talking about Charlie Kirk right now is Paul Pelosi. Nancy husband, Paul Pelosi, he was attacked. This guy broke into the house and hit him with a hammer. And Republicans laughed about it. That's like his big, see, it's just the same. So I'm going to make this very clear. First of all, no, that's not the same. You know why? Paul Pelosi's not dead. Number two, Paul Pelosi was not attacked by a right-wing individual as a targeted political attack. He wasn't. Say, how do you know that? Well, number one, because if it was political, they would have gone for Nancy and not Paul. Number three, it appears the individuals knew each other and it was a localized domestic crime. Now, does that make it right? No. Does that mean Paul deserved it? No. Now, were there people online that did, in fact, note the suspicions and the weirdness of the incident? Yes, absolutely. And then do you know what Paul Pelosi then turned around and did? He turned around and got a DUI. He's had several DUIs, hasn't he? At least two. And those, yeah, absolutely, the DUIs have been made fun of. I've made fun of Paul Pelosi for the DUIs. It is not the same as Charlie Kirk. And by the way, that they are now down to the bottom of their own barrel of arguments to suggest that, oh, well, people making fun of the death of a father and husband who all he did was debate. That's the same as when a couple of anonymous account, like Senator Mike Lee once made a joke about Paul Pelosi being hit with a hammer, who survived. That's the same. It's not the same. Now, is it fantastic? No, of course not. I also remember a lot of Republicans saying to a friend, and I would count him as a friend, we've talked several times, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, I don't know if this is the time for that, dude. So where was the open, oh yeah, this is great, I'm going to defend Mike Lee should have made fun. Oh, that was really fun. I'm not seeing it. The both sidesism pearl clutching ain't working on this one. And this is what's really starting to get under some people on the left's nerves. And I mean get under them as in a long lasting concern. Because if the majority of America starts to pay attention to this, which they are clearly, and starts to be very, very, very overtly concerned over this, then again, just like the situation in which the legacy media attempted to cover up Joe Biden's medical lapse, in the same way that Democrats very, very much attempted to cover up the malicious actions during COVID-19, during the cover-up of the Hunter Biden laptop story, Americans will continue to discount anything that could be said by institutional organizations that are traditionally on the left. Now, there is one last thing that I'm going to make very clear, because I've seen this a couple of times. I've gotten this in a couple of messages that said, well, actually, I want Charlie Kirk to burn in hell because he created hate and division. Okay, that's not a good enough reason to kill him. And if you think that, you're a terrible, awful person. You are. If you believe that because someone said some things that you didn't like, he created hate and division, oh no, there are people who say hateful and dividing things all the livelong day on all sides of the political aisle. All of them. In this country, you have the freedom of speech not to be killed for expressing your opinion. You can't openly incite violence, and Charlie did not. I have yet to see a single video in which he did something. And even if Charlie Kirk did in fact say the things people are accusing him of, which again, I'm not seeing the full videos. I'm seeing little tiny snippets and still frame posts, because if you play the whole video, Charlie comes off as actually a pretty nice guy that you just may disagree with. By the way, do you know who said that? Bernie Sanders, not me. Bernie Sanders talked about it for like 5 or 6 minutes. That, no, Charlie just had different opinions. People out there saying, well, you know, he was hateful and divisive. Oh, okay. All right. That is your standard. Someone says something you don't like, and you will kill them for it. You know, I'm thinking of a group of people in history who made it very, very clear that anyone who said something different was a danger to the state. Just so happens that this crew is the same crew that is currently running around calling everyone who disagrees with them fascists, and it's gonna result in death and all this other nonsense. So those particular points made, we are coming up on, what is it, 8:08 p.m. here. We're in the kind of, normally we would call this section bonus tonus because it occurs outside the broadcast hour. There's a little bit more to discuss there in Chicago, where our eyes are going to be over the weekend specifically. There in suburbs and inside downtown Chicago, there are groups of immigration customs enforcement officers that are conducting operations. Julio Rosas, a friend of the show, has been on several times, also over at The Blaze. He is in Chicago, I believe, at the moment, covering a lot of this. And if for some reason, God forbid, something happens over the weekend in which we do need to go live immediately, it will likely be with Julio, making sure that we get his perspective on the ground. That said, given that we've kind of wrapped that up, I know we didn't really get to talk about NATO and they're reinforcing the Baltic. We didn't get to discuss Nepal. We didn't get to talk at length about some of, well, let's just say there's a lot of external news that is going to come out about Congress in the next couple of weeks and some of the fights in that. J.B. Pritzker accusing Trump of defunding a bunch of police. We will have to cover that one a little bit later. We're going to end the show here because Erika Kirk is getting ready to speak. Again, those links are down in the description. That is over at Turning Point's YouTube, X, or Rumble, and then also broadcast on Fox News. That's in a couple of minutes. Those things said, thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you Monday unless there is breaking news to cover over the weekend. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.